So how many of you in this room have heard of an organization, ministry called Malta Ministries? Just about everybody. Again, evidence of unity. It's a phenomenal ministry that reaches out to folks in our community that need some support at a time in their life. Could include food or clothes. And really it's a ministry that's geared toward going out to bring some of those things as God commands us to do, but not just to fulfill that bodily need, really to offer an opportunity for us to establish a relationship and, God willing, introduce Jesus into their lives as a vessel for Him. I want all of you to know that what's going on with Malta Ministries is having a tremendous impact. And Charles Roe here, brother of mine, is being a little shy right now. I'm not going to put him on the spot, but it's awesome testimony to that. And Dr. Joe's allowed me just a few minutes to share that, and I'm going to take advantage of it. About 3 years ago, 2.5 or so, Christine and I were volunteering for Malta Ministries, and we had an opportunity to go out to Norwich. And we saw a young man, Charles Roe, sitting by himself. There was clusters of other people, but Charles was sort of just all alone by himself. And Christine and I said, why don't we go over and say hello? And we did, and Charles was real quiet, didn't have much of a response, but we just prayed and asked if we could pray with him and offered up a few words. And a couple of weeks later, we went back out again, and Charles had on it was a winter time, he had on a New York Giants cap, and he was a big Yankees and Giants fan and loves sports, and started opening up about that. And I'm a Patriots fan, and at least it gave us something to have a conversation about, but we had that opportunity. A couple of weeks after that, we began to really trust Charles. I think just by looking at him, you guys can recognize how trustworthy he is. But he just came into our hearts, and the Lord just said, I want you to do something special with him. So my wife offered to make a lasagna, and he came over to our house, and we just had an awesome time of fellowship and food, and we got to spend some time watching the Giants play football. It was awesome. Well, the day ended after about 6 or 8 hours of that fellowship at our house, and I said, Charles, it's time that I bring you back to Norwich. So we're driving him back to Norwich, and it was cold, very, very cold, maybe 20 degrees out. I think some snow was falling. And I said, Charles, where should I drop you off? And he said, right over there is okay. Right over there. So I pulled the car over, and Charles got out of the car. And he took a few steps, and came to the tree line, and he took a few more steps, and he turned around and waved goodbye and walked into the woods. And my wife and I were overwhelmed. How can we go back to our home warm, still smelling like lasagna, comfortable? Well, Charles walks into the woods tonight, literally in the freezing cold. And we just began to pray and pray and pray, and so we need to do something about this. And through not what we've done, but through the grace of God and what the unity of the churches in this community, 25 or so, have done, I had an opportunity to offer Charles some space in the Malta house. And Charles went into the Malta house and got very involved with his church. Got himself a job, was taking the bus every day to work, got himself involved in small Bible groups, very, very involved in our Sunday services, just an incredible blessing. And then Charles ran into a little bit of trouble. See, Charles is only known in his whole life being on the streets. Charles's mom passed in a house fire, and Charles really never knew his dad, and Charles really grew up in different foster homes. And Charles will tell you now, with respect to the Lord, that he had an alcohol problem. And it wasn't long after he was staying in the house at Malta that he felt a temptation. And I said, "Bud, there's some help for you. There's a program called Teen Challenge. Pray with me about it." And Charles said, "No, I don't want anything to do with that." I said, "Brother, I really think that's something you ought to check out." And he said, "No, I really don't want to do that." So Charles found a way to go up to New Haven, which is where his only family that he really knew, and his family were just the guys that he hung around with in the bars. And he got to New Haven, and he got himself into a little bit of trouble. Nothing legal, but just with the alcohol. And a couple of days after that, we got a phone call from an officer who actually showed kindness and blessings to Charles and said, "Do you know Charles Roe?" And my wife and I said, yes, we do. And he said, well, you might want to come down and see us, because Charles has been walking from New Haven trying to make his way back to Groton, and he's done about 45 miles so far. And his shoes are worn out. So we went to find Charles, and he was at a little cropping ride, physically broken down. My wife will tell you that she's just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, and she showed love to him. But it was just so heartbreaking to see the wear and tear on this human being. And he said, brother, we need to be doing something about this. And Charles said, well, I'm ready to go back to Teen Challenge. I'm ready to go check out this Teen Challenge place. So we got him up there. And Teen Challenge is, as Charles would say, they call it Teen Challenge because it's a challenge. Very organized, very structured, very, very devoted to the Lord. And Charles said, I want to give this a try. And that was 15 months ago yesterday. And Charles yesterday, commenced 15 months of Teen Challenge, thank God, completely alcohol-free, and he's got a whole new relationship with the Lord. The greatest blessing, though, for me personally, and I say this humbly, but it was just awesome representing all of you and all of the churches in this community, is that as I sat there last night watching the events, I was reminded of the fact that the day that I was there with Charles and really encouraged him to stay there was a difficult day for all of us, but he did it. And then he worked his way through, and then I was there on the day that he commenced, and that was awesome. It was just awesome for me to feel that joy as a representative. But as I looked around the room last night, and there was probably about 200 to 300 people in that room, what really struck me was that some of the graduates had an opportunity to get up and say a few words. And of the few that did, they said, I want to thank my mom, I want to thank my dad, my brother was here. If it wasn't for my brother, I wouldn't have been able to get through this. I want to thank my sister. And it was a lot of applause. And I looked at my brother Charles. And by the way, we have two other phenomenally young men from this church right now in that program that we're praying for as a result of all the churches in the unity. But as I looked at Charles, God just said to me, he's not your brother. He's not your father. He's not your son. He's not your cousin. He's the guy on the side of the road. He's the guy that other people walk by. We didn't. The 25 churches or so in this community didn't walk by. We said, what resources does it need? What clothes does it need? What food does it need? What transportation does it need? What prayer does it need? What love can we show them? And we came together through this organization called Malta to make sure all of those needs were being met. And we got to celebrate with Charles, who in Christ is a dear brother, but in form as we know it isn't related to us at all, but a man that we loved so much that we would stop, that we would prioritize what we were doing, and we would come together as a group of churches in this area to lift somebody up, and he's an awesome blessing. So we're driving home last night, and I said to Charles, of the 15 months that we were there, I know that you had to learn a lot of scriptures, and Charles says about 400 scriptures they had to learn. And I'm not going to ask him to tell us all 400 scriptures. But I said to him, which was your favorite of all of them? And Charles says, oh, that's easy. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 13 about love. And Charles began with the first word of 1 Corinthians 13 about love, and ended with the last word. He knows 1 Corinthians 13 from the first word to the last word without a mistake. And that is about love, and that was God showing us as a community what love is and what unity is in this area. And I'm not going to put him on the spot because he begged me not to, but God willing, someday you'll all have a chance to hear Charles speak with passion and thanks to the Lord about love in 1 Corinthians 13. We love you, Charles.